Alright, let me explain parameters. So, you have your linear animation, which will be this dummy. See how it's just not as smooth? Then you have what I call the back out, which is the motion of like bounces. You can see the difference. One is faster because it's trying to get the motion of the bounce, so it moves faster than linear. As if you go into the easing styles, you can change all this here, as you can see. But elastic and back have something called a parameter, which is what goes into this box. The elastic, which I've never used, has a period and an amplitude, which I'm assuming elastic's similar to bounce, but it has an elastic feel. I don't know how to explain that. And then the back has something called an overshoot, and the overshoot is how much you want the object to move forward and then back to the position. So what I mean by this is that, say, I'm going to take up your loom. Say you had a animation and you wanted this arm to go from here. It would just go from there to there with no stop, with no slowly starting and end starting. It would just go like that, but not as fast or faster depending on where you put the keyframe. Now, if you use back, it would go something like this. The motion would, it would go forward, and since it needs to get to the part where it bounces back like this faster, the animation will be faster, so you need to spread out your keyframes. So starting from maybe this stud, and if it moved over to this third stud over here, it would go this way and bounce over and back. Depending on how much overshoot you want, and the starting overshoot is 1.708, which is the regular overshoot, and you can change your keyframes to make the overshoot longer or shorter, but I would recommend changing the variable of the overshoot. My recommended is 1.3 to 1, but depending on how much you want it to overshoot, like say you had it at 2, you could go like that, or like starting from here, bounce here, or if you want it to almost none, it would be like that. I recommend 1 because it does this much, and it's preferred in most of my animations, which I really like. So that's what goes into the parameters, and I recommend using back in a lot of your animations for stuff like when you're, give an example, when you're trying to push, or you're being like pushed and you're rocking back and forth. That would be an example of using the back out animation. Honestly, there's many better and other ways to do this, which I'm not that experienced in, just 5 months of animating. But honestly, yeah, I would recommend, that's what the parameters are for, and that's what I recommend using back out for. And if you haven't already experimented with easings already, so yes, there is the linear. I'll put this at 30 to show a slower example. Moves to that stud. Now if you were to do it with back out, he would, from this position, he would just bounce into, you see there? See? He's supposed to be there, and you see he overshoots his ghost a little bit. And that's on 1.7. Oh, I was a little bit off in the variable, 1.70158. But if you change the variable to 1.3, you'll see there's a slight less overshoot. It's not as much because it's pretty close. And 1 doesn't have that much difference, but it's much less than 1.7. If you want it like very minimal, I'd recommend 1.5 because you could just barely see it. But it's still, it adds that realism. I wouldn't abuse the easings too much because they start making it animations look too wonky. Now, if you did in and then 1.3, it would start like that. So if you were to do a punch animation and you wanted it to charge up, like you see in most animations, and they tell you, oh yeah, charge up your punch. Like, you could do it linear, it would take more keyframes, but yeah. So something like that. See that? Starting from the starting position, boom. And you might ask like, oh yeah, what happens if you do in out? Well, this happens. Actually, let me put that in a bigger variable for you to see. So they go back, and then bounce on both sides. So they bounce this way, and that way. So they overshoot on both sides if it's in out. But I recommend for most animations, unless you're doing for punching, I'd recommend in. If you're trying to do something like being pushed back and then you're going back forward into a position, I would recommend back out. If you're just trying to do a like swing and then you're hitting a wall but your arm's bouncing off it, then I recommend in out. I've never used out in. Oh, that looks terrifying. Okay, so don't use out in. Out in's usually not recommended unless you're doing a specific kind of animation or like a pause and such. I've never used in out that often. Doesn't make me very happy. I only use it when there's something I'm doing, like, let's say I'm doing a sign in out animation, and then right after that I need to do an out in. So it combines the two. But honestly, I just wouldn't. I would just try to adjust the animation. It's too weird. But yeah. People say that quad is good, as quad is similar to sine, but it just has a different feel to it. I would say the sine is slightly faster. Unless I'm wrong, people can correct me on this. But I used to use quad, and now I use sine. But this video is supposed to be just on parameters, whatever. But honestly, I'm just showing you easings and how to use them. But if you want to make a very basic animation, I would recommend starting with linear, getting used to the signs. So you can do cool stuff like this. Just speed it up. Way too fast, way too fast. Now it's way too slow. I'm just trying to make an example. But you get what I'm saying. So, depending on the easing, it can benefit you a lot. So, see that, oh, doesn't look great. Change the back out, 1.3, because I like that. Okay, I don't like that. It's too fast. It's too fast. And see, I don't need all this extra bullshit going on over here. Sorry, I swear, but I cannot do my language. 3. See that? See that? Less keyframes? Less keyframes. It only took me, if I can pull this up, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. 4 total. And with linear, it take like 6? 6. So yeah, recommend fighting animations. Back out, back in. Just use the back and just use parameters. It's great. Yeah. Well, use it, I guess.